first time I noticed something was wrong. I thought maybe I'd just misplaced a few logs. It was early evening, the kind of late September light that slants through the trees, making the backyard feel like a cinematic tableau. I'd spent the afternoon stacking firewood neatly along the side of my garage, a satisfying, almost meditative task. The smell of fresh-cut oak hung in the air, mingling with the crisp scent of autumn leaves. I came back out after dinner with a cup of tea in hand, ready to light the fireplace, and it hit me, a noticeable gap in the stack. My heart skipped, not because it was a huge deal, but because the symmetry, the neat rows of wood I'd carefully arranged, had been violated. Odd, I muttered aloud, squinting at the pile. A few logs were missing, maybe 4 or 5. Not catastrophic, but unsettling. My gaze wandered to the neighbor's side of the fence. That's when I saw her. Karen. She was the epitome of suburban vigilance, a woman whose glare could cut through steel if she felt her HOA rules were being flouted. She was hauling firewood across her yard, with the sort of precision that made you think she'd been planning this for months. I stomped toward the fence. "Hey, those are my logs," I called. Karen froze mid-step, arms full, and turned with a tight-lipped smile. "Oh, I thought these were, fallen from your tree?" I blinked. "You mean the logs I literally stacked this afternoon?" "Oh, I just couldn't resist. They're so perfect," she said, as though that explained everything. Perfect. I wanted to ask if she meant perfect for burning or perfect for theft. I sighed. "Karen, I really need those back." Her head tilted like a hawk studying its prey. "Well, you know, sharing is caring." I backed off, confused, frustrated, but also vaguely amused. Sharing firewood wasn't exactly a community-building exercise. And yet here I was, negotiating with a woman whose HOA-approved smile could hide 1,000 passive-aggressive threats. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the wind rattle the windows, I couldn't shake the image of her dragging my logs away. And that's when I started thinking. This wasn't just a one-time thing. She was deliberate, calculated, and I realized, with a sinking mix of dread and dark humor, I was now in a suburban war I hadn't signed up for. Little did I know Karen's sharing would only escalate, and I had a plan forming in my head, one that I wasn't sure I'd actually have the guts to carry out. The next morning, I stepped outside hoped that the missing logs had been a one-off mistake. I had coffee in hand, the fog still hugging the ground, and the world looking deceptively peaceful. But as I approached the pile, my stomach sank. Another set of logs was gone, this time 6, neatly taken, like someone had a checklist. I froze, staring at the empty space where the wood should have been, the dew glinting off the remaining logs like a spotlight on my frustration. The quiet of the morning made it feel louder, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the distant hum of a lawnmower, all emphasizing the audacity of the theft. I knew exactly who it was. Karen. There was no one else in this neighborhood who could have the audacity, the precision, and the sheer entitlement to just help themselves. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number. Her ringtone, some obnoxious chirpy tune, was already making my teeth grit. "Karen?" I asked when she answered, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's me. My logs are missing again." "Oh," she said, feigning surprise. "You know, I was just checking if any of them were, loose?" Falling. I laughed nervously, but it was more like a bark. Loose. "Karen, I stacked them myself yesterday. Nothing falls off a perfectly stacked pile by itself. Can we, please, stop taking my firewood?" There was a pause, long enough to make me doubt whether she even cared. Then, in that signature tone, a blend of sweetness and steel, she said, "Well, I just thought you wouldn't mind. It's cold out. I needed some wood. You know, for warmth." Warmth, sure, that explained everything. As if a perfectly fine neighbor, standing on her side of the fence, needed my carefully cut oak to feel cozy. I hung up, simmering. The rational part of me whispered, "Just buy more wood. It's not worth it." But the emotional part, the part staring daggers at the disappearing pile, had other ideas. I began to imagine ways to prevent this. Locks, fences, cameras. Then a darker, more mischievous thought crept in. What if I didn't just prevent her from taking the wood? What if I gave her a little incentive not to? All day, I paced my backyard, coffee cup in hand, plotting. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the neatly stacked remnants of my firewood. I could almost see her little HOA-approved smirk through the fence. And that night, I realized Karen wasn't just taking logs. She was testing boundaries. And I was about to test mine, in ways I never thought I would. I stayed up late that night, staring at the stack of remaining logs as if they were a map to some secret strategy. My mind raced, plotting ways to stop Karen without just snapping. Because I'm not violent. Not really. I like to think of myself as reasonable, calm, but apparently, Karen didn't care about reason or calm. I traced my fingers along the logs, imagining her sneaky little hands lifting them, the way she smiled, that smug HOA smile. That smile, it was the spark that lit something darkly inventive in me. By morning I had a plan. Not dangerous, at least not in a legally disastrous way. Not yet. I'd buy hollow logs, carefully cut to match the size of my regular firewood. I'd fill them with something, attention-grabbing, something that would make her think twice before helping herself again. I didn't yet decide what. Powder, something loud, something that screamed, "Don't touch this." But the thought alone made me grin like a cartoon villain. I went to the hardware store, trying to act casual among unsuspecting shoppers. My arms were full of hollow logs, a small canister of gunpowder hidden in the bottom of my cart like a magician's trick. People probably thought I was remodeling or starting a particularly eccentric fireplace. Back home, I worked in secret under the guise of stacking logs. I cut the hollow logs precisely, filled them carefully, and mixed them seamlessly with the real ones. If Karen didn't notice the difference immediately, she wouldn't notice at all, until it was too late. By the time I finished, the sun was setting, painting the backyard in fiery oranges and reds. I stepped back to admire my handiwork. The stack looked untouched, perfectly ordinary. No hint of the plan nestled inside, but the tension in the air was electric, like the calm before a storm. I could almost hear her. Almost. The thought made my stomach twist with equal parts anticipation and guilt. I hadn't done anything yet, but soon I'd know if Karen's boldness had limits. And in that quiet, when the shadows of the trees stretched long across the yard, I realized something else. This wasn't just about logs anymore. This was about principle, territory, and proving that I, finally, would not be toyed with. But even as I laughed quietly to myself, a little thrill running down my spine, I had no idea that Karen, sharp and cunning as ever, had already started noticing changes in the yard, and she wasn't going to take it lying down. The next morning, I woke to the sound of a lawnmower humming too close to my fence. Groaning, I peeked out the blinds and saw Karen, sun hat tilted just so, a pair of gardening gloves that probably cost more than my coffee habit, patrolling her yard like a general surveying a battlefield. And then my heart sank. She was staring straight at my firewood. I poured coffee into a travel mug and stepped outside, trying to appear casual. "Morning," I called, forcing a smile. "Morning," she chirped, as if nothing had ever happened between us, except, of course, that she had just stolen my logs for the third time, or maybe fourth. I'd lost count. I busied myself raking leaves, pretending not to notice her slow approach. But Karen had a way of cornering you socially, a predatory kind of politeness. She stopped just a few feet from the fence, eyes scanning the new stack with that irritatingly sharp, HOA-approved precision. "Oh, looks like you've rearranged things," she said, tilting her head. "Very neat, very professional." I nodded, trying to hide the slight tremor in my hands. "Yeah, just tidying up." Her smile widened. "You know, it's funny. Sometimes logs just seem to disappear around here." She glanced sideways, knowingly, as if making a joke at my expense. I swallowed. My palms itched. I wanted to tell her the hollow logs were ready for her, that every stick she took now came with a little surprise. But I stayed calm. That's weird. Karen's eyes lingered on the stack longer than necessary. "Well, I'll be careful this time. Maybe." And with a wink that could cut glass, she sauntered back to her yard, leaving me with a strange mix of triumph and dread. I spent the day walking on pins and needles. Every shadow, every rustle of leaves felt like a potential Karen strike. My imagination ran wild. Was she peering through the fence at this very moment, plotting her next move? By evening, I realized something crucial. She was escalating, testing limits, and enjoying it. And now, I was committed. The hollow logs weren't just a prank anymore. They were a statement. But as I lit the candles in my living room and listened to the wind rattle the fence, I couldn't shake the creeping anxiety. What if she noticed before the logs did their work? What if she suspected something? And then, from the corner of my backyard, I saw a shadow move where no shadow should have been. I froze, my hand still on the candle holder, as the shadow shifted along the fence line. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a stray branch. No, this was deliberate, slow, cautious, almost predatory. My pulse quickened. I crept to the window, peering through the blinds. Karen. Of course it was Karen. She was crouched, examining my stack of logs with an intensity that could only be described as borderline forensic. My stomach twisted. She was going to touch them. She was going to lift one of the hollow logs. I debated running outside, yelling, stopping her before anything happened. But something inside me, part curiosity, part dark humor, held me back. I wanted to see her reaction. She ran her gloved hand over the logs, gently, almost reverently, as if they were artifacts in a museum. Then she paused, frowning. She picked one up, tested its weight, shook it slightly. And then her eyes widened. "Oh," she muttered under her breath, the single syllable dripping with confusion. "What the—" I couldn't see her face fully, but I could hear the faintest hitch in her breath, a noise I'd never imagined coming from. "Karen." She set the log down, carefully, and picked another. Same reaction. She tapped, lifted, even sniffed it, as though trying to make sense of what had changed. My chest tightened with anticipation. This was it, the moment of truth. I imagined the swirl of thoughts behind that glare, the combination of suspicion, pride, and disbelief. Then she straightened up, scanning the yard like a soldier reassessing the battlefield. Her eyes met mine across the fence. There was a flicker, anger, maybe curiosity, maybe the beginnings of respect. "Did you change them?" she demanded, voice sharp but restrained. I stepped out, trying to keep my tone calm, casual. "Maybe," I said, "just some new logs I picked up." Karen tilted her head, studying me. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of autumn leaves and the faint scent of oak. She didn't reach for the logs again, not yet. Instead, she backed away slowly, muttering something about weird and how the HOA would feel. I exhaled, a mixture of triumph and unease washing over me. My plan was working, but the thrill was short-lived. Because deep down, I knew Karen didn't just disappear from a challenge. She was scheming, and whatever she had planned next, it would be bigger, sharper, and probably even more ridiculous than before. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to anticipate her next move. My mind kept replaying her shadowy figure, her narrowed eyes, the subtle twitch of her lips when she realized something was off. I'd won a small battle, but the war had only just begun. And then came a soft knock on my door. I froze at the knock, my stomach doing that familiar flip that comes right before a suburban nightmare. Karen. Of course it was her. Who else would come knocking at 9 p.m. in the middle of autumn? With that particular brand of polite menace, I opened the door just a crack, enough to see her face but not enough to invite trouble inside. "Karen," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Everything okay?" Her smile was tight, precise, like she'd been practicing it in a mirror for weeks. "I just wanted to talk," she said, her tone innocent but with an undercurrent of danger. She held up her hands, palms out, a gesture meant to appear non-threatening. "No log touching tonight, I swear." I stepped outside, folding my arms. "All right, talk." Karen glanced at my stack, eyes flicking to the hollow logs she'd tested earlier. "I noticed something unusual about your firewood," she began. Carefully chosen words. Deliberate, like a lawyer laying a trap. "It's different, lighter. Some of it feels strange." My chest tightened. I couldn't give anything away. I forced a casual laugh. "Yeah, just got some new wood, a bit drier than the old stuff. Nothing to worry about." Her smile didn't falter. She leaned closer, voice dropping just a fraction. "You know, I like to keep things fair around here. Rules, boundaries, respect." She gestured vaguely toward the stack, a subtle accusation wrapped in civility. "And I hate surprises." I blinked. "Fair enough, I didn't mean to surprise anyone." Karen paused, studied me, then straightened. "Good," she said. "Because if surprises start happening, well," she let the sentence hang in the air, her smirk sharp enough to cut glass. I swallowed, suddenly aware of the night's chill and the thrum of adrenaline through my veins. "Right. No surprises," I said, too quickly, maybe a little too eagerly. She nodded once, satisfied, or pretending to be. "All right then, I'll be keeping an eye on things." And with that, she turned and walked back to her house, her presence lingering. Like a shadow long after, she disappeared behind her front door. I closed the door slowly, heart racing. My plan had worked. The logs had done their job. She'd hesitated, questioned, maybe even feared a little. But one thing was clear, Karen wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. As I sat back down staring at the stack, I realized I was now in uncharted territory. What had started as stolen firewood had become a full-blown psychological chess game. And Karen, she was a formidable opponent. A faint rustling outside made me freeze. She wasn't done testing me yet. The next few days were a tense blur. Every creak of the fence, every crunch of leaves underfoot made my nerves spike. I found myself checking the stack obsessively, counting logs like a paranoid accountant. Karen hadn't taken anything since our nighttime confrontation. But that silence felt more like a threat than a relief. I decided it was time to escalate, carefully. Not reckless, but strategic. The hollow logs, already filled and ready, needed to be positioned so that Karen couldn't resist them. I moved them to the very center of the stack, blending them perfectly with the real wood. My fingers trembled slightly, partly from excitement, partly from fear. I could almost hear Karen's voice in my head. "You think you can outsmart me?" By evening, I had retreated inside, pretending to read while keeping an eye on the blinds. The sun dipped low, and long shadows stretched across the yard, giving everything an almost cinematic glow. And then I saw her. Karen. Slow, deliberate, silent as a cat. She circled the stack, eyes scanning, hands hovering just above the logs. My heart pounded. I could see her calculating, sensing something different about the pile. She lifted one log, carefully, cautiously, and turned it in her hands. A frown formed, her brow furrowed. "Huh," she muttered. "This feels lighter than usual." I held my breath, sipping my coffee like a statue. She set it down, picked another. Same reaction. She tilted her head, examining, weighing, testing. Her HOA precision face was unreadable. Anger, curiosity, confusion, or maybe all three. Then she straightened abruptly, glancing up at my window. Her eyes locked on mine. There was that spark again, the one that said she knew something was off, even if she couldn't quite name it. "I swear," she muttered under her breath, "someone is messing with me." I wanted to cheer silently, but instead I just smiled a little, trying to appear calm, innocent. My stomach twisted with a mix of triumph and fear. This was working. My trap was working. But then she did something unexpected. She stepped back, eyes scanning the yard like she was plotting her next move. And for the first time I realized, Karen wasn't just reactive, she was proactive. She wasn't going to be tricked so easily. The wind rustled the trees, the sky darkened, and I felt a chill. This game had reached a new level. And in the distance, the faint creak of the fence hinted at her next move, one I couldn't yet anticipate. By now, the tension in the neighborhood was tangible. Every glance from a passing neighbor felt like it carried judgment. Every rustle of leaves a potential Karen ambush. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt truly relaxed. My life had become a delicate balance of hiding my satisfaction and anticipating her next move. That evening, I stepped outside with a flashlight, pretending to check the logs. The hollow ones, perfectly blended, sat at the center like ticking time bombs of suburban justice. My heart thumped as I scanned the yard. Nothing. Too quiet. Too easy. Then a shadow moved. Karen. She emerged from behind her garage, flashlight in hand, eyes darting to the stack. She crouched low, careful, silent, a predator inspecting her prey. I held my breath. Every instinct told me to yell, "Stop her, run," but curiosity anchored me in place. She touched one log, lighter, strange. Her fingers hesitated. Then another, lighter. A flash of realization crossed her face, quickly replaced by indignation. What did you do?" she hissed, stepping back. Her voice was sharp, tight, dangerous in that way only a true HOA warrior could wield. "Nothing," I said casually, trying to mask the thrill I felt. "Just rearrange the wood." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Rearranged? Really?" She leaned forward, inspecting a log again, running her hands over the surface as if expecting it to bite her. "You think you can play games with me?" A smile tugged at my lips. "Maybe I did," I admitted, keeping my tone calm. But it seemed necessary. Her glare could have melted steel. "Necessary?" she repeated, voice rising. "For what? For fun? To humiliate me?" I shrugged innocently. "Maybe both." Karen took a deep breath, her hands clenched. And I realized something important. She wasn't going to retaliate physically. No, this was all mental, strategic. She would find a way in her mind to make me pay without ever touching me. Or the logs. She straightened, her posture regal, her eyes sharp. "All right," she said, tone cold and measured. "Consider this a warning. One more surprise, and the HOA will be involved. You hear me?" I nodded, heart still racing. Loud and clear, Karen turned and disappeared into the shadows of her yard. Silence fell, thick and heavy, like a warning hanging over my backyard. The logs sat there, innocuous, ordinary, deadly, and I realized the war wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She had escalated, and I had escalated. Next time, neither of us would be holding back. The morning after Karen's warning, the neighborhood felt different, like the air itself was charged with tension. Birds seemed quieter, the wind gentler, yet every sound carried weight. I stepped outside, expecting to see a pile of empty logs, angry footprints, Or maybe Karen standing there with a clipboard and a lecture. Nothing. The stack looked untouched. Perfect. Peaceful. Almost serene. For a moment, I allowed myself to relax. Maybe I'd won. Maybe the hollow logs had done their job. Or maybe Karen had decided the risk wasn't worth it. I poured a cup of coffee and settled onto the porch, feeling a small sense of victory. And then the rustling began. Not at the fence, not from the trees, right in the stack. A subtle, soft movement, almost imperceptible. My pulse spiked. I crept closer, cautious, my hands shaking. And there it was. One of the hollow logs had shifted slightly. I hadn't touched it. My stomach lurched. Karen. She had returned. She stepped out from behind the corner of the house, arms crossed, eyes flashing with equal parts fury and amusement. "Well," she said, voice low and dangerous, "I suppose we both learned something this week." I tried to stay calm. "Yeah?" I asked, heart hammering. "What's that?" Karen smiled, no, smirked. "That some people don't give up, and that some people shouldn't be underestimated." She gestured toward the logs. "I'll leave your little project alone for now. But remember, this is a neighborhood. Boundaries matter. Respect matters. And next time, don't think you can outsmart me so easily." My shoulders relaxed slightly, but my mind raced. This wasn't over. Karen was brilliant, relentless, and she had just admitted it herself. But for now, the stack remained intact. The hollow logs, silent, dangerous, victorious, had done their job. As Karen disappeared once more behind her fence, I stood there looking at the pile. Triumph and dread tangled inside me. We had reached a tense equilibrium, a stalemate forged in wood, strategy and stubbornness. I knew one thing for sure. Every fire I'd light this winter, every log I burned would carry the memory of that war, that dance with Karen. And somewhere, deep down, I smiled at the thought, because even in the chaos, I'd won a small fiery victory. The backyard was quiet again, too quiet. But that, I thought with a wry grin, was exactly how I liked it. For now. If you felt the sting of this story, tap like. Justice often begins with one small act. Subscribe to Karen's Hub, so you don't miss real stories of ordinary people reclaiming their boundaries. And tell me below, how would you handle a Karen in your life?